It was 2:11 a.m. when I woke up gasping, heart fluttering in my chest like a frightened bird. The room was quiet, but my body wasn't. It never was anymore. Every breath felt borrowed, every beat a gamble. The pain in my joints, a slow-burning fire, reminded me why I couldn't sleep for more than a couple hours at a time. My throat felt dry as old paper. I needed water. I pushed the blanket aside, the fabric clinging to my skin with the static of age. My legs protested when I moved. 71 years old, and every bone reminded me of it daily. My fingers curled around the nightstand for support. I glanced at the clock again. Still 2:11. Still alive for now. The room was dim and plain, once Floyd's home office, now my hospice chamber. Lorraine had repainted it a soft blue and hung some photos of the kids to make it feel more like home. But it never did. The smell of old cigars was trapped in the walls, no matter how many times she scrubbed. This house didn't remember me like my own home did. Here, I was just passing time. I reached for the slippers the kids gave me for Christmas, cheap ones, soles already peeling. "They're just slippers, Grandpa," Derek had muttered, half annoyed when I inspected them. 14 going on 40 and already stealing smokes from Floyd's jacket when he thought no one noticed. Paige, at 11, wore her mother's lipstick better than most grown women. Both of them barely looked at me anymore, like I was furniture that spoke too slowly and breathed too loudly. The hallway outside my room was soaked in darkness. I stepped out carefully, avoiding the one floorboard that creaked like a scream. This house never let me forget I was a guest. At my old place, my real home, every corner had memory. Lorraine called it falling apart, but I called it familiar. That place still had my wife's touch on the furniture, her perfume in the curtains. Lorraine didn't understand. "You can't live alone anymore, Daddy," she said after the heart attack. Her voice had been soft, but her eyes cold. "You need monitoring. You need someone who knows what to do." She meant control. She didn't want a father, she wanted a patient. Pills arranged by color in plastic boxes, daily check-ins like I was a suspect. No freedom, just caretaking under the pretense of love. I walked through the kitchen in silence, greeted by the tick of the wall clock and the hum of the refrigerator. I poured a glass of water, my hands trembling so badly I spilled some, wiped it off with my sleeve. Lorraine didn't tolerate mess. She inherited that from Elizabeth, but where my wife's neatness had been gentle, Lorraine's was militant. Order as punishment. Elizabeth, my chest tightened, not from arrhythmia this time, but from memory. 3 years gone and still, I reached for her at night like she might be there. 47 years together. 6 months of cancer tore her away, and the world hasn't had color since. She would have hated this house. I sipped the water and turned to go back to my room. That's when I heard it. Muffled voices, low but urgent, seeping from the living room. At first I froze. Lorraine and Floyd were both supposed to be asleep. It was a Wednesday, no late-night drinks or movie nights. Why were they whispering? I crept closer, footsteps soft against the cold linoleum. My fingers clenched the hallway wall for balance. The door to the living room was open just a crack, a thin strip of yellow light leaking into the dark. "We're not going to last much longer like this," Floyd's voice, harsh, tired. "The last warning from the bank came in today. 2 more missed payments and we're done." I felt the first flicker of dread, like a match in the dark. "I know," Lorraine replied, her voice strained. "But what do you expect me to do, Floyd? I already work double shifts. I can't squeeze blood from a stone." Then came the words that punched me right in the gut. "Your father's house," Floyd said. "It's empty, sitting there wasting away if we sold it." "No," Lorraine snapped. "We talked about this. He'd never agree. That house is his life." Floyd's voice grew sharper. "He lives with us, eats our food, takes up a room, gives us nothing but that pathetic pension, and he won't even help us. That house could save us." My hand trembled against the wall. My pension, my house, these were their burdens. "And what do you suggest?" Lorraine asked coldly. There was silence. Then Floyd whispered, so low I almost didn't catch it. I say we get rid of the old man. My heart stopped. My breath caught. I couldn't move. My own daughter's husband had just said those words like he was ordering pizza. Are you crazy? Lorraine replied, but not with shock, more with fatigue. You said it yourself, he's sick. One more heart attack and it's over, no suspicion, natural causes. I backed away from the door like it had just burst into flames. My vision blurred. My chest screamed, but I couldn't stop listening. He lives on pills, Floyd continued. You work at the hospital, you know how to do it, a little extra dose, something subtle, he dies in his sleep. Lorraine said nothing. My mind raced. They wanted me dead, they wanted my house, and they thought I wouldn't see it coming. My knees nearly buckled, but not yet, not here. I wouldn't make it that easy. I had to run. Now. I pressed myself flat against the wall, trying to quiet my own breathing. Every beat of my heart felt like a drum in my chest, loud enough to give me away. From behind the cracked door, their voices continued, low, sharp, soaked in fatigue and desperation. I heard everything, every word. You can't be serious, Lorraine said at last, though her voice lacked conviction. He's my father. Floyd scoffed. The same father who barely noticed you growing up, who skipped your graduation, who never came to your award ceremonies. Come on, Lori, don't romanticize him now. My legs felt weak. I leaned harder into the wall, trying to ground myself. He's not a bad person, she whispered. But he's in the way, Floyd snapped, and you know it. I closed my eyes. The pain in my chest wasn't just from the heart. It was the kind of pain that settles deeper, the kind that tells you something you once believed in has just shattered. Like a mirror dropped on a cold tile floor, the reflection of my daughter, my baby girl, was now fragmented, twisted into something I didn't recognize. Floyd's voice dropped again. We don't have time, Lori. The mortgage is drowning us. The loan for the boat, the tuition, the new car. You want to lose everything for a man who's halfway in the grave anyway. You're talking about my father, she snapped again, but there was a tremble in her voice. Not anger, uncertainty, fear, hesitation. He'll die soon either way, Floyd pressed on. His heart's a ticking time bomb, you said it yourself. If we do nothing, we're bankrupt. The kids on the street, is that what you want? Silence followed. I held my breath, afraid even a whisper would betray me. Then she spoke. I can get dioxin. A high dose can mimic cardiac failure. It would look natural. My stomach turned. That's my girl, Floyd said with a smile in his voice. No one would question it, not with your record, 20 years of experience. They'd call you a hero for trying. The glass in my hand slipped from my grip and landed with a dull thud on the kitchen floor. The voices stopped instantly. What was that? Floyd hissed. Dad must have gotten up, Lorraine said quickly. I'll check it out. Panic gripped me like a vice. My hands shook, knees nearly gave out. I had seconds, maybe less. If she came out and saw me now, if she realized what I'd heard, there'd be no need for plans. They'd do it now. I bolted down the hallway, pain forgotten in the surge of adrenaline. I shut my bedroom door quietly but firmly, locked it, and leaned back against the frame, chest heaving, pulse thrashing in my ears. Dad, her voice was right outside, too calm, too cheerful. Are you awake? I swallowed hard. Yeah, I croaked, doing my best to sound half asleep. Just went to the bathroom, heading back to bed. You sure you're okay? Fine, I forced the words out, steady, measured. Good night, Lorraine. A pause. Good night, Dad. Her footsteps retreated. Only then did I allow my legs to give out beneath me. I slid to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. They were going to kill me. Not strangers, not criminals, my family. My daughter and her husband conspiring to make me disappear like a line item on a spreadsheet. For what? Money, convenience, the house. I looked around the room at the old gym bag in the corner. My hands moved on instinct. I pulled it out, opened drawers, tossed in the essentials, socks, sweater, wallet, old documents. There was an envelope buried deep under a pile of papers. Emergency cash. I'd kept it there for years. Elizabeth used to call it the rainy day fund. Well, the rain had come. I changed into jeans and an old flannel. My fingers trembled as I shrugged into my raincoat. It was February, cold outside, but better to freeze out there than die in here. The window creaked as I opened it. I paused, listening. Nothing but the hum of the fridge and the ticking clock down the hall. My room was on the first floor. The lilac bushes just beneath would break my fall or my hip. I didn't care. I lowered myself down, boots sinking into wet grass. The night air hit me like a slap. It burned in my lungs and made my eyes water. But I was free. Sort of. I crept across the backyard, gripping the gym bag like a lifeline. When I reached the gate, I hesitated. One creak and they'd know. I pushed gently. It groaned just enough to make me wince, but no lights came on. The street was dark, empty. Street lamps flickered like dying fireflies. And so I walked, not away from a house, but from betrayal, from blood turned poisonous, from the cold realization that to them I wasn't a father anymore. I was an asset, an obstacle, a line to be removed. They would find the empty room in the morning, the window open, the bed cold. They'd know I'd heard, and then the chase would begin. But for now, just for now, I walked, step by step, one heartbeat at a time. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew exactly what I was running from. The cold stabbed through my coat like needles as I stepped farther from the house. My fingers, still stiff from arthritis, barely kept hold of the gym bag. I didn't dare look back. Not once. Every second I expected to hear a door slam open, footsteps chasing behind, a voice calling after me, not with love but with panic. Panic that the plan was ruined. I passed the neighbors' homes one by one. Silent, dark. The world slept while I ran for my life, an old man shuffling through suburban streets like a ghost. I didn't have a destination. I didn't have a map. All I had was instinct, the same instinct that told me to flee before my own daughter and her husband finished what they had started. My legs ached before I'd made it 2 blocks. My heart thudded erratically, warning me it could quit at any moment, but I kept walking. If I stopped, I'd never start again. My pace was slow, uneven, but it was forward, and right now forward was everything. Federal Way in February is merciless. Ice crept into my joints and my lungs begged for warmth. The wind sliced through the trees and cut across my face like razors. I pulled the collar of my coat higher and pressed on, eyes searching the dark for shelter, a bench, a store, anything. But there was nothing, just empty sidewalks and lonely streetlights. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that it was all a dream, a nightmare conjured by a tired brain, rattled by medication and grief. But the sound of Floyd's voice was still too vivid, too sharp. Get rid of the old man. That sentence alone would be burned into my memory until the day I died. If I lived long enough to tell someone. Every few blocks, I stopped to catch my breath, leaning against cold lampposts or mailboxes. Once, I dropped my bag and had to kneel to pick it up, a humiliating, exhausting effort that left my chest tight and my vision swimming. You're not dying, I whispered to myself. You're just scared. But my body disagreed. I fumbled for the nitroglycerin pills in my pocket, the ones Lorraine insisted I always carry. Irony, I thought bitterly. Her past concern was now my lifeline. I slipped one under my tongue and waited, feeling the burning on my gums and the familiar sting of guilt. For running, for surviving, for being too weak to have stopped any of this sooner. Elizabeth would have known what to do, she always did, but she was gone. And now I was utterly alone. Eventually, I reached a convenience store, a beacon of fluorescent light in an otherwise black world. I ducked inside, the bell above the door were jingling. The young man at the counter barely glanced up from his phone. I didn't blame him. I looked like hell. My coat was soaked, my cheeks bright red from the wind, and my gym bag hung like it weighed 100 pounds. I must have looked like every cautionary tale he'd ever heard about lonely, senile old men. I shuffled down the aisles, pretending to browse. I grabbed a bottle of water, a cheap pack of cookies. My fingers were so numb I nearly dropped both. At the counter, I managed a tired smile. "It's cold tonight," I said. The boy nodded, pulling out one earbud. "Uh-huh. Do you know when the buses start running?" 5:30, he answered. "Number 20 stops just around the corner." I nodded. "Mind if I sit a while, warm up?" He eyed me, maybe deciding if I was dangerous or just sad. "Buy something else," he muttered. "Boss doesn't like bums sitting here." I didn't argue. I bought a small coffee from the machine and shuffled over to a plastic table by the window. The seat was hard and cold, but I didn't care. I sat down like a man collapsing into safety. My hands curled around the coffee, and I let the heat sink into my skin. Outside, the wind howled. The streets remained empty. I was invisible again. How had it come to this? A father, a provider, a man who worked 40 years, built a home, raised a child, buried a wife. And now I was hiding from that same child, clutching a cup of instant coffee like it was salvation. I'd given Lorraine everything. My time, my care, even my house, keeping it in my name, yes, but saving it for her. It was where she was born, where Elizabeth had painted her bedroom walls yellow, where we planted a lilac bush to mark her first steps. And now she wanted to sell it. Worse, she wanted me out of the way to do it. The coffee was gone by the time the sky began to lighten. Pale pink crept over the horizon, and the first hints of day broke through the storefront glass. The boy behind the counter ignored me. I was grateful for it. At 5:25, I stood up slowly and shuffled to the bus stop. My legs screamed in protest, but I ignored them. If I could just get to the other side of town, back to my old neighborhood, maybe I could find help. Gar Tower still lived there, last I heard. He was older, retired, but sharp. Maybe he'd believe me. The bus hissed to a stop, and I climbed aboard. The driver didn't say a word as I handed over crumpled bills. I sat by the window, gripping my bag, watching the world roll by in shadow and mist. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew one thing: I was still alive. And I wasn't going to die quietly. The bus let me off near a familiar corner, one I hadn't walked in years. The city looked different than it had when I lived on this side of town. Bigger, shinier, but still indifferent. Streetlights blinked overhead, casting wide yellow halos on the pavement. No one looked at me twice. An old man with a bag in his hand, moving slow through the dawn. I could have been anyone. I could have been no one. I knew I had about 2 blocks to walk if Gar Tower still lived where I remembered. 2 blocks. It sounded manageable, but every step felt like climbing a hill. The cold gnawed through my boots, biting at my toes, and my knees moved like rusty hinges. My chest tightened again, just slightly, like a warning whisper. I pushed on. The houses here were older, like me. Not the polished suburban shells Lorraine and Floyd lived in now, but single-story homes with peeling paint and fenced-in yards. This neighborhood had soul. It remembered things. The pavement still held footprints of people long gone. Here, my life with Elizabeth had unfolded piece by piece. Birthdays, backyard barbecues, the first time Lorraine rode her bike without training wheels. This was home, or at least the ghost of it. Halfway down the street, I had to stop. I leaned against a fence, sucking in air like a drowning man. My fingers fumbled in my coat pocket for another nitroglycerin pill. The tablet dissolved bitterly under my tongue. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. Don't collapse now, you're almost there. When the pressure eased, I started walking again. 1 foot, then the other. My gym bag knocked against my leg with each step like a metronome. metronome of suffering. Finally, I reached Gar's place. Same green roof, same white fence, same rusted mailbox with his name barely visible on the side. I hesitated. It was early, 6:30 maybe, too early for guests, let alone half-frozen fugitives, but I had no choice. My strength was running out. I opened the gate and walked up the short path. The porch creaked as I stepped on it, a sound that made something deep in my memory ache. I pressed the doorbell. A silence. Then footsteps inside. When the door opened, Gar stood before me, older than I remembered, with more white in his beard and tired lines around his eyes. But the same sharp gaze, the same calm presence. "Whitmore," he said, blinking like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I need help," I rasped. "Please." He stepped aside without asking anything else. "Come in, you look like death." I walked into the warmth of his house and nearly collapsed right there in the hallway. He helped me into the kitchen, sat me down at the table. The smell of coffee and old wood filled the air. It was like stepping back in time. Gar poured me a mug, pushed it toward me, and sat across the table. "Start talking," he said gently. So I did. I told him everything. How I'd woken up in the night, how I'd gone to the kitchen for water and heard the whispers, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, plotting with her husband to kill me. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. He didn't interrupt, not once. Just watched, listened, drank his coffee like it was the only thing anchoring him to this world. When I was done, the silence stretched. "Jesus," he muttered finally. "You're serious." "I wish I wasn't." Gar leaned back in his chair. "And you're sure you didn't imagine any of it? You didn't mishear?" I looked him in the eye. "They said, get rid of the old man. That's not a misunderstanding." He nodded slowly, the doubt fading. "You think they'll look for you?" "They will, maybe not to save me, but to shut me up." Gar rubbed a hand over his face. "Well, you're not going back there, not until we figure something out." I felt tears sting at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, from relief. He believed me. Finally, someone believed me. "Thank you," I whispered. "Your family," he said simply. "That still means something to some of us." He showed me to the spare room, Margaret's old sewing space, now empty but clean. He even brought me a change of clothes. I peeled off my soaked boots, slipped under the covers, fully dressed. My body felt like it had been beaten, wrung out, left to dry. But I was warm, I was safe. For now. Lying in that unfamiliar bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process it all. My daughter, my grandchildren, the house Elizabeth and I built together, now reduced to a property line on a mortgage spreadsheet. What had happened to love, to loyalty? Was I always just a burden to them? Somewhere deep down, a seed of something else stirred, not just fear. Anger. They thought I was done, that I'd go quietly, fade out, take my pills and disappear. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. The next morning dawned gray and quiet, the kind of day where the world seems to hold its breath. I woke slowly in Gar's spare room, muscles stiff and joints protesting every movement. But for the first time in days, my heart beat without that frantic hammering of fear. In the kitchen, Gar was already up, brewing coffee, the rich, bitter aroma filling the small space with a comforting normalcy. He looked up when I shuffled in, offering a tired but genuine smile. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pouring a cup and sliding it across the table. "Alive," I said with a faint smile of my own. "That's something." Gar nodded, his eyes warm but wary. "You told me what you heard last night. It's a lot. I don't blame you for running. Hell, I'd probably do the same if it were my family." I sighed. It's hard to believe that the people I trusted most could plan something like that. And worse, to think my own daughter agreed. I don't know what broke her, or if it was never really love at all. He poured himself a cup and took a slow sip. Sometimes people get desperate. Greed makes monsters of us all, but you're not alone in this. You have me." Those words, simple, true, were balm for a soul raw with betrayal. We talked for hours. Gar listened as I recounted everything, and slowly ideas began to form. We knew what we needed, proof. Without it, no one would believe a word I said. The story would sound like the ramblings of an old man, confused and forgotten. Recording their conversations, I said, a spark lighting in my tired eyes. Get them to confess. A real confession, something undeniable. Gar rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It's risky, but it might be the only way. We went over the logistics. How to get back home without raising suspicion. How to keep safe. How to hide a recording device. Gar's house was a fortress compared to the battlefield I'd just fled. Days passed as I rested, my body slowly recovering from the night's ordeal. Gar kept a close eye on me, bringing food, reading the paper aloud, and sharing stories of old neighbors. It was a refuge, a pause in the storm. But my mind never stopped racing. How long before Lorraine and Floyd discovered I was gone? Would they come looking? And what if they did find me here? At night I lay awake, memories swirling. Elizabeth's gentle smile, Lorraine's childhood laughter, the home we built brick by brick. I pictured the house now empty, cold, filled with shadows and secrets. Yet despite the fear, despite the pain, a quiet determination settled in my bones. I would fight, for Elizabeth's memory, for my life, for justice. With Gar's help, I gathered an old tape recorder from a dusty box, its analog charm a relic in a digital age. The machine still worked, blinking a red light when I pressed record. It was clunky, but it could capture the truth. Gar and I practiced conversations, tested the device, and planned my return. I would pretend to have lost my memory, play the part of the confused old man. It was a dangerous charade, but it fit the narrative they wanted everyone to believe, that I was senile, paranoid, delusional. When the day came to make the call, my hands trembled as I dialed Lorraine's number from Gar's phone. She answered on the first ring. Relief washed through her voice. "Daddy, where are you? We've been worried sick." I told her my story, the episode, the confusion, waking at a bus stop, the kindness of a stranger. Her tone softened, laced with professional concern. She called it a paranoid episode, something common in elderly patients after heart issues. I played along, humbled, tired. "Yes, I want to come home," I said. "I just need to get my head straight first." She agreed, cautioning me to call if I felt unwell. After the call, Gar and I exchanged looks. This was only the beginning. The stage was set. Now it was time to go home. The next day, I woke to a dim light filtering under the door. The soft murmur of a television filled the room. Groggy and stiff, I pulled myself out of bed, each movement sending small shocks through my aching joints. I shuffled to the living room where Gar was settled in his worn armchair, his eyes fixed on the flickering screen. "Oh, you're up," he said without turning. "They're talking about you." I crossed the room slowly, my heart catching in my throat. The television showed a local news broadcast, my face staring back at me from the screen, pale and worried, under the headline, "Missing Elderly Man with Heart Failure Found." The reporter's voice was calm but tinged with concern. "Federal Way police are seeking help in locating 71-year-old Whitmore Hampton, who disappeared last night from his daughter's home. Mr. Hampton suffers from heart failure and requires daily medication. Authorities fear he may be disoriented due to age-related dementia." Dementia, the word struck me like a blow. Gar glanced at me knowingly. "They're painting you as confused, lost. It's a neat story for the public." Lorraine's face appeared on screen next, her eyes red, voice trembling with a practiced sorrow. "Daddy, if you see this, please call us or come home safely. We're very worried. You need to take your medication. You know how important that is." Her husband Floyd stood beside her, hand on her shoulder, his expression solemn. yet calculating. Mr. Hampton recently suffered a micro-stroke, he added, as if to justify any odd behavior. Doctors have warned us about potential memory and orientation problems. We want him to be safe. I clenched my fists, fury and disbelief swirling inside me. I had never had a stroke. Never. They were twisting facts, manipulating the narrative to cover their tracks. Gar turned off the TV and looked me in the eye. They're crafting a story to discredit you. If they find you, they'll say you ran off confused. Nobody will believe your side. I sank into the couch, the weight of their deception pressing down. They were erasing me, turning me into a delusional old man in the eyes of the world. And Lorraine's a nurse, Gar said quietly. Her word carries a lot of weight. They are rewriting history, I whispered, making me the villain in my own life. Gar's face hardened. We need real proof, something they can't deny. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang sharply, snapping us both to attention. My heart pounded. Had they found me already? Gar went to answer, leaving me trembling in the silence. A man's voice spoke softly, unfamiliar and official. Gar returned moments later holding a piece of paper, a police alert, a flyer with my photo, a description and warnings about my condition. They're canvassing the neighborhood, Gar explained grimly. If they come back with a warrant, it won't be easy to hide. I clutched the flyer as if it were a lifeline and a noose at once. I was trapped between visibility and invisibility, between truth and the lies they spun. Gar placed a steady hand on my shoulder. We'll figure this out, but without solid evidence, no one will believe you, not against the word of your nurse daughter and her husband. His words sank deep, but they were the bitter truth. I was no longer just fighting for my life. I was fighting for my identity. The room felt heavy with silence as Gar and I sat, the weight of what had happened pressing on our shoulders. Without proof, my story was just the ramblings of an old man. They'd turned me into a victim of my own mind, a lost soul drifting in dementia's fog. We need a plan, I said, voice low but determined. Something concrete, a confession, evidence. Gar nodded slowly. You're right, but how? They're careful, they know what they're doing. I pulled out the old tape recorder I had found at Gar's house. It was bulky and outdated, but it worked. The red light blinked as I pressed the record button. If I can get them talking, if I can catch their words, then maybe I'll have a chance. Gar smiled grimly. Risky but smart. You'll need a way to get back without raising suspicion. I'll play the part, I said. Pretend I've lost my memory, confused, scared. It fits their narrative about me. He looked doubtful. And if they try to act fast, what if they suspect? They won't, I insisted. There's too much attention right now. They'll wait. I'll give them what they expect, a frail, forgetful old man. We talked late into the night, planning every detail. Gar sewed a small inside pocket into the lining of my vest, a perfect hiding spot for the recorder. Tapes would be kept safe in an old shoebox where Lorraine wouldn't think to look. I practiced the story with Gar, dialing Lorraine's number from his phone. Her voice on the line was strained but convincing, relief mixed with cautious concern. I told her about a paranoid episode, a memory lapse, and a kind stranger who had helped me. She played the role of the caring nurse perfectly, coaxing me home, promising help. Yes, I said during our rehearsal, I need to do this on my own, to prove I'm still capable. Gar gave me a worried look but nodded. Just call me if anything goes wrong. If I don't hear from you in 3 days, I'm calling the police. We agreed on a signal. When I left the house, I'd call or text from a discreet phone he gave me. If I was ever in danger, he'd come running. The day before my return dragged on like a bad dream. I checked my pulse more times than I could count, afraid my heart might fail at the worst moment. Gar lent me a baseball cap and an old jacket for a crude disguise. At last the evening came. Gar drove me close to Lorraine Street, stopping a block away. "Go in, get what you need, and get out," he instructed. "If you see Floyd's car, leave immediately." My hands trembled as I stepped out of the car. The cold February air hit me hard. This was it. Walking down the quiet street, memories clashed with fear. The house where Elizabeth and I had built a life, now a battlefield where trust had been broken. I still had the spare key hidden under the birdhouse in the backyard, a secret I'd kept since Lorraine was a child. She thought she'd taken every key when I moved out. I smiled bitterly. Sliding the key into the lock, I stepped inside. The house smelled of dust and neglect, 6 months without life. I moved quietly to the study, moonlight filtering through the window. Opening the desk drawer, I found the important papers, deeds, bank statements, everything intact. Then came the sound I dreaded, a car pulling into the driveway. Voices, Lorraine and Floyd. Panic gripped me cold and sharp, no place to hide. I crouched behind the desk, heart pounding like a drum. The key turned in the front door, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the silence like a knife. A flood of yellow light spilled into the dim study, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I froze behind the heavy desk, every nerve screaming in anticipation. Lorraine's voice was the first to cut through the quiet. "We'll need to hire a cleaning service before we show the house," she said, her tone clipped, businesslike. Floyd's footsteps echoed behind her. "Junk needs to go, furniture, books, all of it." I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms, the sting grounding me. They were discussing selling my home, my sanctuary, like it was already theirs. Lorraine spoke again, almost casually. "The realtor says the neighborhood's good. With some cosmetic work, the price could go up." "No time," Floyd grumbled. "Banks breathing down our necks. 1 more month missed and it's foreclosure." Their voices felt like daggers in my chest. I stayed hidden, heart hammering, praying they wouldn't search this room. I was lucky. The open desk drawer went unnoticed, the papers inside untouched. I pressed record on the tape recorder hidden in my vest pocket, the little red light my beacon of hope. If I could capture their voices, their plan, I might stand a chance. Minutes dragged by as they discussed logistics, cleaning crews, pricing, deadlines. Their conversation was void of warmth or regret, as if erasing me was just another chore. They argued briefly about the boat and other expenses, luxuries built on a foundation of my suffering. Floyd complained about debts. Lorraine voiced a quiet, resigned frustration. I was an obstacle, a line item to erase. After what felt like hours, their footsteps receded. The front door slammed, then the sound of a car pulling away. Only then did I exhale, muscles loosening. I gathered the papers hurriedly, tucking them into my bag along with photos of Elizabeth, our marriage certificate, and letters, fragments of a life they wanted to erase. My hands found an old electronics box on the shelf. Inside was a tape recorder, the one I'd used years ago to record notes, dusty but functional. Batteries still held power. I tested it, watching the red light blink. It worked. Hope flickered. If I could get them to confess on tape, I'd have proof, irrefutable proof. I packed the recorder and spare tapes carefully. One last look around the house, the bedroom where Elizabeth and I slept, the living room of celebrations, the kitchen where pancakes were made. Memories haunted every corner. I stepped outside, locking the back door behind me and slipping the key back into its hiding place beneath the birdhouse. Gar was waiting, his face lined with worry. "You're late," he said. "They didn't see me," I replied, climbing into the car. They were still just planning, sure I'd run or was already dead. Gar shook his head. "Family isn't blood, it's who cares, who stays, who doesn't betray." I nodded, the bitter truth settling deep. The fight was far from over. The days that followed were a tense blur of careful movements and whispered conversations. Gar kept a constant watch over a loyal guardian in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. Every sound felt magnified, a creak in the floor, a distant engine, a footstep on the sidewalk. Paranoia was a bitter companion but necessary. I kept the tape recorder tucked safely in the secret pocket Gar had sewn inside my vest, ready to capture every word. I had to play my part perfectly, the confused old man, vulnerable and fragile. But beneath that fragile mask, I was gathering strength. Then came the break I desperately needed. One afternoon, Floyd arrived home earlier than usual, his voice low and tense as he spoke with Lorraine in the kitchen. I quietly turned on the recorder and cracked the bedroom door ajar just enough to listen. "Did you get it?" Lorraine's voice was muffled but clear. "Yes," Floyd answered. "Your colleague didn't ask questions. He believes it's for a terminal cancer patient." My chest tightened. They were discussing the poison, the drug they planned to slip into my medication. "When do we start?" Floyd asked. "We have to wait," Lorraine replied. "Too risky right after his return. Everyone remembers the disappearance. We wait a week, maybe two." Floyd's voice was sharp. "The bank won't wait forever." Lorraine's reply trembled slightly. "It's not easy. He's my father." "Not to me," Floyd sneered. "Who left you and your mom, who missed your graduation, who criticized you all your life?" The weight of those words settled like a stone in my stomach. They saw me as nothing but a burden. Lorraine's voice softened. "Murder is murder." Floyd objected. "It's euthanasia. We're just hastening the inevitable." Their conversation was brutal, merciless. I clenched my fists, fighting the rage that threatened to overwhelm me. They planned to poison me slowly, a little at a time, masked as medication. Lorraine mentioned hiding the drug in the medicine cabinet behind a secret panel, safe from the kids but right within their reach. When they finally left the room, I switched off the recorder, heart pounding so hard it threatened to burst. That evening, I poured my own pills into empty containers, replacing them with safe ones Gar had given me. I couldn't trust Lorraine's offerings anymore. The next morning, she brought my breakfast with an unsettling care, watching closely as I took every pill. "You look pale today," she said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "If it gets worse, you have to tell me." I nodded, swallowing my fear. The days passed with a tense anticipation. I kept recording, capturing their conversations as they planned, plotted, and justified their actions. Then one evening, pain exploded in my chest, a sudden sharp squeeze radiating down my arm and jaw. I dropped the remote, gasping. Lorraine was instantly at my side, her professional mask slipping just for a moment to reveal panic. "Dad," she called, checking my pulse. Floyd appeared, confused but alert. "Call an ambulance," she commanded. As paramedics arrived, Lorraine slipped into her nurse role flawlessly, calm, efficient, caring. I wondered, was she saving me out of genuine concern or fear of exposure? The ambulance raced through the night, sirens blaring. I clung to consciousness, desperate to survive not just for me but for the proof I held, the fight that wasn't over. The hospital room was cold. Too clean, too white. Machines blinked beside me like silent judges, tracking my heart as it stubbornly kept beating. I lay there motionless, wires in my veins, oxygen in my nose, pretending to sleep when Lorraine came to check on me. She touched my forehead gently, eyes searching my face not for love but for signs. Signs of what? Weakness, memory loss, doubt. "Dad," she whispered, "just let go. You've lived a long life. You're tired, aren't you?" My eyes stayed shut, but I recorded every syllable in my mind. She thought I didn't hear, but I did. After she left, I pressed the recorder beneath my pillow, still running, still collecting. Every breath I took became a weapon. I wasn't going to die in this sterile tomb. Not yet. Not until the truth saw daylight. Gar arrived the next afternoon, relief flooding his face when he saw I was alive. Thought they got you, he muttered, gripping my hand. They tried, I rasped, but I've got it on tape, everything. He didn't waste time. That evening he delivered the recordings to a lawyer he trusted, an old friend from back in the day. The man listened with headphones, leaning forward more and more as the confessions unfolded. Floyd's voice, Lorraine's voice, the words dioxin and euthanasia. A plan, a timeline. I've never heard anything like this, the lawyer said grimly. It's not just circumstantial, it's deliberate. He contacted the police. Within hours, 2 detectives arrived at the hospital, not uniformed but sharp-eyed and quiet. They spoke to me gently, respectfully. I told them everything. The overheard conversation, the escape, the poisoning plan, the false missing person report. I showed them the tapes. They listened in silence. The look in their eyes changed as the recordings played. "This is attempted murder," one of them said. "You realize how serious this is?" I nodded. They were going to kill me slowly, legally, and no one would have known. The next morning they arrested Floyd in the driveway. Lorraine watched from the porch, stunned. She screamed at the officers, demanded to know what was going on, but they had the tapes, her voice, her plan, her complicity. When they cuffed her, her eyes found mine through the hospital window. For a second, I saw my daughter again, not the woman who had tried to end me, but the little girl who cried when her bike tipped over, who used to call me Daddy with wonder in her voice. But that second passed, and she was gone. The story hit the news like a bomb. Federal Way woman and husband arrested in plot to kill elderly father for property gain. My picture returned to the screen, this time not as a victim of dementia, but as the man who survived. The public outcry was swift. Nurses, families, advocacy groups, people were horrified, disgusted. Gar stood beside me at every hearing. The lawyer handled the details. I sat in the courtroom and listened as tapes played, my own voice in the background, brittle and weary. Floyd's arrogance on full display. Lorraine's tired resolve. They both cried on the stand. They said it was desperation, that they never meant to go through with it, that it was all talk. But the jury didn't buy it. They were found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and fraud. Sentenced, stripped of their licenses and reputation. I didn't celebrate, I didn't feel triumph. Just silence. At home, my real home, I sat on the porch with Gar weeks later, watching the wind sway the lilac bush Elizabeth had planted. "They thought you were too weak to fight," he said. "They thought wrong." He smiled. "What now?" "Live," I said simply. "Because they tried to take everything, my house, my voice, my life. But they forgot one thing. I was still here. And I still remembered who I was." The courtroom victory didn't bring peace. The cameras left, the reporters packed up, but the hole inside me remained. I sat in my old house, alone, surrounded by the relics of a life that now felt unfamiliar. Photographs of Lorraine as a child stared back at me from the mantel, smiling innocently, frozen in time before the betrayal. I couldn't take them down, not yet. Gar visited daily. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, other times talk about anything but them. Baseball, weather, old war stories. But there was always a ghost between us, a ghost shaped like family. One afternoon the doorbell rang. I hesitated before answering. These days I didn't trust unexpected knocks. But when I opened the door, I saw 2 small figures standing there. Derek and Paige. My grandchildren. They looked older than I remembered, taller, quieter. Derek held something in his hand, an envelope. Paige stood beside him, clutching a school notebook. I opened the door wider but said nothing. Derek stepped forward. "Grandpa, Mom told us you were sick, that you forgot things." Paige looked down. "But you didn't forget." "No," I said softly. "I remembered everything." Derek offered me the envelope. "We're sorry. We didn't know what was really happening." I took it. Inside was a letter not from Lorraine but from Paige. Childlike handwriting, lines uneven. Dear Grandpa, I'm sorry they tried to hurt you. I don't want your house or money. I just want to visit sometimes and hear your stories again. Love, Paige. I blinked, my throat tightening. Can we come in? Derek asked. I stepped aside without a word. The three of us sat in the living room, quiet at first, like strangers waiting for a storm to pass. Paige curled into the same armchair Elizabeth used to love, her knees tucked to her chest. Derek leaned forward on the edge of the couch, glancing around like he was trying to rebuild a memory he barely recognized. They didn't ask about the trial, they didn't mention their parents, and I didn't press. Instead, we talked about small things. The fish pond in the backyard. The old swing I built that still hung from the oak tree. The attic where I stored their mother's childhood toys, still boxed up, untouched. When they left that evening, I stood on the porch and watched them walk down the path, their figures fading into twilight. The silence that followed was different this time. Less hollow. More hopeful. Weeks passed. I began a new routine. Morning walks around the block, tea at sunrise, reading the paper out loud to no one in particular. The quiet didn't frighten me anymore. It kept me grounded. I was learning to live again, slower, smaller, but real. Then one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single page, neat handwriting, familiar. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I do want the truth to be known, especially to the kids. I was scared. Floyd was louder, meaner, and I was weak. That's not an excuse, just the truth. I hope you're safe now, I hope you live. It wasn't signed, but I knew. Lorraine. I didn't cry, not for her, not anymore. But I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. I didn't destroy it. Some truths need to exist, even if they hurt. Gar and I started spending afternoons in the garage, turning it into a workshop again. Tools on the wall. Coffee cans filled with nails. We built small things, birdhouses, stools, a new bench for the porch. It gave me purpose, motion. Derek started coming by after school, quiet at first, but one day he asked, "Did Mom always want you gone?" "No," I said, but something inside her changed. Life wears people down sometimes. The worst parts take over if you don't fight back. He didn't speak again for a while. But he came back the next day. And the next. We built a shelf together, then a model plane, then a new door for the shed. Paige came on weekends. She brought her sketchbook, drawing birds in the backyard, asking questions about Grandma Elizabeth, who she never really got to know. She liked tulips, I told her. She used to talk to the plants like they were friends. Paige smiled. I talk to my drawings sometimes. I think she'd like that. By spring, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. The walls held warmth again. The kitchen smelled like pancakes on Saturdays. I even found myself humming under my breath sometimes. A tune I couldn't quite place, but one that made me feel like myself again. Gar laughed the first time he heard me. "Didn't think I'd ever hear you sing again," he said. "Didn't think I'd ever want to," I replied. Then one Sunday morning, a woman appeared at the edge of the yard. Not Lorraine. Her name was Sharon. She introduced herself as Floyd's sister. She had the same angular jaw and sharp eyes, but there was something softer in her voice. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "For what he did. He wasn't always like that, but we saw him change, and none of us stopped it." I looked at her for a long moment. He almost killed me. She nodded, "I know." We stood in silence, no need for more words. Before she left, she said, "If you ever want to meet Floyd's mother, she's still alive. She doesn't know everything, but she's not like him." I thought about that for days, but I never called. Some branches are better left untrimmed. In early summer, I started tending the garden again. The soil was stubborn, dry from years of neglect, but it remembered me. The roses along the fence were mostly dead, but a few yellow buds fought their way through. Elizabeth had always loved the yellow ones. Sunlight trapped in petals, she used to call them. I spent my mornings with a small shovel and a watering can, speaking softly to the roots. It felt foolish at first, but it grounded me. One afternoon, Paige joined me. She didn't say anything, just knelt in the dirt beside me and began pulling weeds. Side by side, we worked in silence, sweat running down our necks. After an hour, she looked up and said, "It feels safe here." I didn't reply, I just kept digging. Derek started talking more too. Little things, school, friends, teachers. Then one day, while painting a fence post, he asked, "Are you ever going to forgive her?" I didn't answer immediately. I finished the brushstroke, set the paint down. "I don't think forgiveness is something you decide on," I said. "It either grows in you or it doesn't. Right now, I'm still planting." He nodded like he understood, though I don't know if he did. We kept painting. Later that week, I got a call from a social worker handling Lorraine's case. She asked if I'd be open to speaking to her. "She's not asking to come home," the woman assured me. "Just for a conversation. Closure, maybe." I said I'd think about it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch watching the sky, the stars blinking behind thin clouds. I remembered Lorraine's first fever, the way she clung to me, afraid of monsters under her bed. I remembered the way she used to sing in the back seat, off-key but full of joy. I remembered birthday cakes, science projects, broken hearts, all of it. I also remembered her voice saying, "We can make it look natural." The next morning, I called the social worker back. "I'll see her," I said, "but not alone." They arranged a visit at the community center 2 weeks later. Neutral ground. Paige and Derek both asked if they could come. I told them no. This was mine to carry. When I walked into the small meeting room, she was already seated. Thin, pale, no makeup, she looked older than her years. There were gray streaks in her hair now. She didn't stand. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. I nodded and sat down across from her. Between us sat a worn wooden table. Neither of us spoke for a while. "I'm sorry," she said at last, her voice shaking. "I never thought it would go that far. I didn't know how to stop it once we started talking about it." I stared at her, searching her eyes for the girl I once knew. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked. "About the money, about Floyd, about everything." She looked down. "Because I didn't think you'd help, because you always seemed disappointed in me." Her voice broke, "And maybe I wanted to punish you for that." My hands rested on the table. I didn't move them. I didn't speak. "I deserve everything that's happened," she said. "But I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad the kids still have you." Silence again. I stood. "I don't forgive you, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life hating you either." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "That's fair." I walked to the door. Before leaving, I turned back. "If you ever get out, and you're still the person who wrote me that letter, maybe we'll talk again." She nodded. I left. Outside, the air felt heavy but not unbearable. Gar was waiting by the car. He didn't ask anything, just opened the door for me. We drove home with the windows down. That evening, Paige asked how it went. I told her the truth. "It hurt," I said, "but I'm glad I went." She hugged me before bed. She was taller now, almost my shoulder. As the days passed, things didn't return to normal, but they began to settle into something close to peace. The mail no longer brought dread. The phone rang without fear. The morning started with the kettle whistle instead of anxiety. I found myself laughing again, quiet, short bursts that surprised me. Some wounds remained, deep ones, but they no longer bled. They scarred, and scars in their own way are proof that healing happened. One late evening, as the sun dipped below the trees and cast the backyard in golden light, I sat with Derek and Paige on the porch swing. The breeze was gentle. The silence was good. Grandpa, Paige said, "Do you still think about what happened?" I nodded, "Of course, but not like I used to." "What do you think about now?" Derek asked. I thought for a moment. The birds chirped in the trees. The wind rustled the lilacs. "Right now," I said with a smile, "I think about how lucky I am that the story didn't end where they wanted it to." And for the first time in a long, long while, I believed it. The summer faded slowly that year, like it didn't want to leave. The days stretched long and warm, the kind of days that smell like cut grass and second chances. I woke up earlier than I used to, habit mostly, and watched the sun rise through the living room window while the house was still quiet. Paige started leaving her sketchbooks around the house, sometimes open, sometimes closed. I never told her, but I looked through everyone. Her drawings had changed since spring. The colors were softer, the lines were steadier. In one of the pages, she'd drawn a scene of the backyard, the bench, the roses, and an old man holding a watering can. I kept that page. Derek began showing interest in carpentry. He wasn't great at it yet. He measured once, cut wrong, swore softly like he thought I wouldn't hear. But he cared. He stayed. That mattered more than the rest. One afternoon, we built a new bird feeder together, and while sanding the edges, he asked me, "Do you think I'm anything like him?" He meant Floyd. I paused, set the sandpaper down, looked him right in the eyes. "No," I said, "you're nothing like him. But what if I mess up too? What if I hurt someone one day?" "We all mess up," I said, "but hurting someone on purpose, that's a choice, and you have the power to make different choices, always." He nodded and went back to sanding. He didn't say anything else for the rest of the day, but he worked with more care. There was something healing in the routine of that summer, the sameness of it. Wake, water the garden, feed the birds, listen to Gar rant about the Mariners, laugh at the way the dog across the street barked at the mailbox like it was alive. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't exciting, but it was mine. One morning, I received another letter, this time from Lorraine's lawyer. She wasn't asking for contact. She wasn't trying to make excuses, just a formal notice. She'd agreed to a plea deal and would be moved to a long-term facility. 10 years, maybe more. There was also something else inside the envelope, a small note in her handwriting. Asterisk, "I still think about Mom every day. I know you do too. If you ever want to visit her grave together, maybe someday we could do that. I'll understand if the answer is no." Asterisk. I read it once, then again. I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer with Paige's sketch and Elizabeth's old gardening gloves. I didn't know what my answer was yet, but I didn't throw it away. Some doors don't need to be reopened, but some don't need to be slammed shut either. As the first leaves of fall began to drift across the porch, I realized I had done something rare. I had survived my own erasure. I had reclaimed my name. Not through revenge, not through anger, but by simply refusing to disappear. Fall came quietly. The wind started carrying that dry, amber smell of dying leaves, and the porch creaked a little louder under my steps each morning. The house felt different in the cold, not empty, just still. There was peace in that, peace I hadn't known in years. Gar came by less often. His knees didn't like the cold, but when he did, he brought cinnamon donuts and grumbled about his radio cutting out. "You're getting famous in the neighborhood," he said one morning, dropping his coat on the rack. "The guy who lived, the old man who beat the devil." I chuckled. All I did was survive. That's more than most. We ate in silence after that, the kind that only exists between people who have seen the worst and kept showing up anyway. A few days later, I got a call from the local community college. Someone had passed my name to a professor in the social ethics department. They were teaching a class about elder law, and she wanted to know if I'd speak to her students. "I'm no public speaker," I told her. "You're a survivor," she said. "That's more valuable." I said I'd think about it. That night I sat with a pad of paper and started writing what I might say, but nothing came out, not at first. Then Paige walked in. She sat across from me and placed her sketchbook between us. "You should do it," she said. "Some of us want to understand, but no one tells us what to watch out for." I looked at the drawing she'd made, a rough sketch of me in my chair, a tape recorder in one hand, a cup of tea in the other. I nodded. I said yes the next day. The auditorium wasn't big, maybe 50 students, but the room was full. I sat on a stool with the recorder in my pocket, the same one I'd used to catch the voices that tried to silence me. "I don't remember the day my daughter stopped being my daughter," I began. "I just know it happened, and I know I didn't see it." They listened. Some leaned forward. Some looked away. A few cried. I told them everything, not for sympathy, for awareness, for truth. I told them how it happened slowly, like a sickness spreading under your skin. You trust, you forgive, you explain away the red flags. Until one day, they're planning your funeral while you're still alive. When I finished, there was silence, then applause, not loud, just respectful, solid. A few students came up after. One said, "My grandfather went through something similar, but he didn't make it." Another just hugged me. I went home that night lighter than I'd felt in years. That was the first of many talks. Over the next months, I spoke at senior centers, libraries, small colleges. Not because I wanted to be known, but because I didn't want anyone else to feel invisible, forgotten, dismissed. Survival means nothing if you don't pass it on. I started writing too. Just small things, memories, stories, moments. I never meant to turn it into a book, but Paige kept making little illustrations to go with the pages. Derek typed them up on the old computer in the study. Gar edited mercilessly with a red pen and a cup of tea. And somehow it became something real. We self-published. Not many copies sold. But the ones that did, they reached the right people. One letter came from a woman in Kansas. "Your story helped me leave. I was afraid no one would believe me, but they did, because I had your words." Another from a nurse in Arizona. "We've added new protocols because of what you went through. You changed how we listen." One afternoon, long after the first frost, Derek came into the kitchen holding a padded envelope. Inside was a letter from the state board. Lorraine had been officially barred from reapplying for a medical license. Her request for early parole had been denied. I didn't smile, but I slept better that night. The roses outside had gone dormant again, but they'd survived another year, just like me. Winter rolled in heavy and early. The sky stayed gray for days at a time, and the cold settled deep in the bones, not just in the wood of the house or the soil outside, but in me. The kind of cold you don't shake with blankets or tea. But I wasn't alone anymore. The kids came around more. Paige brought her sketchbook, her drawings now more detailed, more confident. One day she showed me a picture of the house, not how it was now, but how it looked when Elizabeth was still alive. Porch light on, curtains open, roses blooming. "You never saw it like this," I said softly, touched. She shrugged. "I see it how it feels." Derek came by most evenings, sometimes bringing leftovers from his mom's old recipes, dishes I hadn't tasted in years. He didn't talk much about her, and I didn't ask. Some things still needed space. Around Christmas, I got a card. No return address, just a single line inside. Asterisk, "Thank you for not letting the darkness win. Merry Christmas, Dad." Asterisk. I stared at it for a long time, not knowing if I felt peace or grief. Maybe both. I tucked it into the book page, and I had made the first copy, with her name and mine on the cover. It sat on the shelf next to Elizabeth's favorite books now. That felt right. On New Year's Eve, Gar and I sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets, thermoses of cider hand. Fireworks cracked in the distance, but we didn't need to see them. This year was a strange one, he said, adjusting his scarf. They all are, I replied. Think it's your last big adventure? I smiled at that. God, I hope so. We laughed, the kind of laugh only old men can get away with, half joy, half disbelief. He leaned back and looked up at the sky. You ever wonder why you made it, why you got out when so many don't? I thought about that for a long moment. I think I got lucky, I said, and I think I had people who didn't give up on me, even when I gave up on myself. He nodded. You did more than survive, you made it count. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The new year came quietly. No grand declaration, no midnight toast. Just breathe in, breath out. The days grew longer again. In the spring, I planted new roses, bright yellow, like Elizabeth loved. Paige helped me dig the holes. Derek measured out spacing like we were laying the foundation for something sacred. They bloomed faster than I expected. Every morning I walked outside with my coffee and watched them open, petal by petal. Not because they were miraculous, but because they reminded me of something important. That even after everything, after betrayal, after heartbreak, after nearly dying, life still finds a way to grow. And so do we.